Hi, my name's Gay Lemon and I'm here today with two fabulous gay men. I've got the lovely Brian Day and also young Richard Jordan. And what we're going to be talking about today is the need for, I guess, collaboration and understanding between people who come from very different generations in the queer community. And hopefully we'll discover a little bit about the differences between what each of these lovely men have experienced in their life to this point. And obviously there's a little bit of age difference. You may not be aware, but in fact they aren't the same age. But we do have the lovely Richard here, who I believe is 26, and Brian, who is 68, is that right? So there's a little bit of difference, and today I'm 48, so it's a nice little mix. I fit somewhere in between two of these, and yeah, so let's have a bit of a discussion about what the world has been like for each of you. So maybe we might start with Brian. Brian, you've been an activist for a long time now. When did you really, I guess, start to get involved in your activism?
Right from the beginning of camp in Brisbane, circa 1971. Yeah, beginning of 1971.
So that's quite a while that you've been doing various actions. How would you say that you're still involved in a fairly active way in the gay and lesbian community?
No, not very active anymore. I decided I'd done enough, and gets a bit tiring after a while, and yeah, so I don't do a lot these days. Just plus living out of town, it's travel and all that jazz. I don't like driving in the city, so I'm involved a bit with Quack on the Sunshine Coast at Brisbane. That's about all at the moment.
Still, that's not bad. That's 38 years of your life essentially that you spent as an activist in one form or another. So you were an activist longer than this beautiful man here has been alive.
Yeah.
So Richard, tell us a little bit about your story. When did you come to terms with, I guess, your sexuality?
Quite late. I only came out about 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it took me a long time. Yeah, so when I was about 24, and yeah, I guess part of this play has been kind of, I guess I partly wrote it to kind of reconcile two parts of myself, the self that I'd always known and my gay self, and trying to work out how they can be the same person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because what I need to mention, of course, and what I forgot to say, is that Richard has written a play called 25 Down.
Yeah.
What's the basic premise behind your play?
Okay, the play's about, it's set in Brisbane, and it's kind of about Generation Y, quarter-life crises kind of thing. It's kind of like a black comedy, and it centres around a young man who is gay, and he lives with an older gay man who was an activist in the 70s and helped bring about the decriminalisation of homosexuality, amongst other things. And which is why I interviewed Brian as part of the research process when I was writing the play. But because there's some conflict in their relationship, not in our relationship, but in their relationship, in that they've lived with each other for about 2 years, and James is the main character. He's an artist, but he's an art school sort of dropout, and he's quite lost in his life, and he doesn't know who he is. And the older gay man, kind of, because of, his name's Gary, because of his struggle and his what he achieved during his younger years, he came to define himself through his sexuality. That became his definition, and the young gay man doesn't define himself that way. And so I kind of feel like there is a little bit of that at the moment, in the different sort of generations at the moment. And a few of my friends, I told them I was coming to this today, and they kind of rolled their eyes a bit, and my gay friends, I should say. And they don't necessarily see the need for unity as much, or they don't that's not how they define themselves. So there is a bit of tension there at the moment, I think, and it's something that I think should be addressed and discussed. So yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Just from my own personal perspective, I know when I was coming out, which is probably halfway between the two of us, as an activist, I was probably very active in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
And I know for me, community was really huge, and supporting and maintaining some sense of unity was still really powerful. And one of the things I've seen through the late 90s and certainly into the noughties has been this, I guess, a move away from identity politics as such. Brian, when you think about when you were first coming out, how important was it for you to identify as a gay man?
Oh, like, it was really important because I actually came out before the term was invented. When in the late 60s, living in Sydney, in King's Cross, and that's why I lived in the Cross, because that was the gay ghetto, or it was the camp ghetto in those days. And so the whole notion of community, identity, gay is good was becoming the way we were dealing with things, and then that became a big catch cry for the beginning of the gay movement. So instead of being mentally ill and criminal and all those sorts of things, all of a sudden there was a group of us, and it was slow. It had happened, you know, there were people before us even. It was just a slow development, but yeah, I mean, all the oppression hadn't been named at that stage of game, but once it got named by people like Dennis Altman, yeah, the identity was the big thing, and I just took it on, and it sort of became a vocation almost to create a new culture.
And from my own experience, I know we were still trying to come to grips with that in the 80s and 90s. So it's been a very rapid move away from I guess, certainly from where you were to where I am, and then to where Richard is now, where it's become almost passé, I guess, to become part of this sort of community gathering, or even feel the need to celebrate what is still in many ways a vilified state of being, you know, and to think that we still don't have the same essential rights. So in terms of that, tell me a little bit about for you. You said you came out a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
What was the greatest challenge that you faced as a young gay man coming out in the 2000s?
Well, it's interesting because you'd think it'd be easier. Like I think it's kind of surprising that I was, well, I guess compared to a lot of people, 24 isn't that late. But still, the way the world has evolved, you might think that everyone would come out at 16 and take their partner to the formal. You know, that seems to be the way things are going, and some people have been doing that, you know, lately, which is great. Maybe, I don't know, maybe for, I mean, obviously I'm 26, so maybe 16-year-olds now, maybe, you know, when I was 16 in the 90s, it was a bit different. But yeah, so, you know, it still took me a long time. I guess the greatest challenge for me was trying to understand who I was in terms of, you know, I was told that gay was a certain thing, and that if you were gay, you were a certain type of person, and then I saw that image, and then I saw me, and I couldn't quite put the two together, and that remains an ongoing struggle, I have to admit. Yeah.
And so, Brian, in terms of what you've just heard Richard say, in terms of when you came out, what was the biggest thing that you had to deal with?
Telling the family. I mean, I ran away. Yeah, I just ran away, and it was the best thing I did. But, like, you know, I came out. My family's from Ipswich and fairly conservative. Yeah, and I didn't tell them till I was 30 actually, when I came back to live in Queensland, because by then I'd started to go public, so they had to know. Yeah, and it wasn't very easy. It was also very difficult at work. Like, I worked in the Commonwealth Public Service, and I didn't think it was going to be too much of a problem there, but it was.